Hi, everyone. Before the episode begins, I just want to remind you to follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Marlene the Plant Lady and YouTube, Everything Gardening with Marlene Simon. And remember, please, please, please rate and review on iTunes and Spotify. That just helps the podcast get noticed by more people, and then more people will become better gardeners. And that's what we all want. So enjoy the episode.
Look at that plant. I want you to know that everything was grown in my garden. Don't touch that plant!
Is it poisonous?
She'll become part of the plant.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Flower Power Garden Hour. I'm your host, Marlene, and tonight I have a guest, Justin Hancock, and he works for Costa Farms. Many of you who grow houseplants and other interesting plants have probably heard of them. But what got me really excited to have Justin as a guest is he collects and grows and knows everything about passion vines. So we're going to sort of touch upon both. We're going to, of course, hear about how he got to where he's at today. We're going to do some houseplant tips and growing information, but I really do want to start out with those passion vines. But first, hello, Justin, and welcome.
Hello, Marlene. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So you heard me introduce, first of all, I don't even know what is your title? What do you do at Costa Farms?
I'm a horticulturist here at Costa Farms.
Okay. All right. I mean, that's what I call myself too, but sometimes people, venture off into weird, different things once they start in the horticulture, realm. And have you always been into plants?
I have. I was one of those weird 5-year-olds who, when the other boys wanted to be astronauts and firemen, I knew that I wanted to work with plants.
Awesome. So where'd you grow up?
I grew up in northern Minnesota,
Ooh,
which is the perfect place to love tropical plants, right?
If I was in northern Minnesota, I think that's what I would want to do. I'd be craving that too. Wow.
And then I went to college, University of Wisconsin at River Falls, just over the border from the Twin Cities.
What zone is northern Minnesota?
So I grew up in Zone 3,
Ooh,
3A.
Okay. I just asked just because I need an understanding of what you could grow in there. So did you ever grow tomatoes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Did they ever set fruit? I should say ask that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We got fruit, not nearly as much as I discovered we could, when I moved to more southerly zones later in life.
Okay. So when you were growing, so you always were interested in tropical plants. So even as a kid going into plants, it was always tropical plants. So did you have a greenhouse, or did you grow most inside, or did you sort of just grow them as annuals?
No, I started with the plants in the house.
Okay.
And then the more I grew, the more they crept outside with me.
And how did you manage them in zone 3 for?
So in high school, it was really, and even in college, it was really just keeping them in my house or my dorm.
Oh, okay.
I never really had great outdoor space for the tropicals.
Got it. Okay.
And then after college, when I started having my own space, that I pushed outside, and initially I would bring everything in and out, and then I got to the point where I was I guess comfortable enough letting plants go that these tropicals are fine being annuals.
Mm-hmm.
I'll try something new or replace them next year, but these, I love too much. I can't quite let them go.
So were you a horticulture, plant bio? What was your major in college?
Yep, horticultural science.
Okay. And then from right after that, what did you do?
I was perhaps the luckiest person on the face of the planet.
Okay.
The summer of my senior year, I applied for an internship with a publishing company doing a gardening magazine.
Oh, okay.
And,
Nice.
being a college student, it's tough to schedule sometimes. I had to find a friend's car to borrow, all that good stuff. So by the time that I was able to go to the interview, they had already filled the position, but they were kind enough to let me interview for the experience anyway.
Okay.
And we just sort of hit it off, and they ended up offering me a real job. So I worked the full time over the summer. My senior year, I just did the one semester. I did college 3.5 years. So I worked part-time, and then after graduation, I was full-time there, um, talking about gardening.
Nice. So you wrote for them? Is that
Yes.
okay? All right. And did you have a writing background, or did you know you could hang? You could hang.
I was always strong in English in high school,
Okay.
and some of my teachers were really pushing me to try to go that route, the
Mm.
the communication. But plants were really my passion. And freshman year in college, I scored an internship with a book publisher in Minneapolis,
Ah,
and
okay.
that sealed the deal. Like, this is where I really want to be.
Got it. And where both of those, yeah, unique worlds collide. I wrote for the Sacramento Bee for just a bit, but when they, asked for me to write, I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't written since college. How's this gonna go? Luckily, my husband's a great editor, but it was fun. But like with writing, people don't know how much work really goes into the background of it. And of course, I'm one of those people that's been, quote, writing a book for like years and years. Probably on my
Mhm.
deathbed, it might be published, maybe. So good for you. So, but then now you work you live in Miami and you work for Costa Farms. And tell us a little bit about Costa Farms and what your role there is.
So Costa Farms is the one of the largest wholesale growers in the country, and it's actually the largest grower of indoor plants in the world.
Okay.
We grow on about 5,000 acres across the U.S. and in the Dominican Republic.
Oh, okay.
And in total, it's about 1,500 different varieties of
Wow.
indoor and outdoor plants.
Okay. I didn't realize you guys. So, where are different locations at? So, Dominican Republic, and then.
Yep, Dominican Republic is really cool. That's we call it our stock farm. That's where all of
Hmm.
our mother plants are that we propagate from.
Oh, I was there. When was I there? 2 years ago. 2 years ago. Oh, should have visited. Uh, so what
Yeah,
is?
next time let me know and we can set up a tour.
Yeah, yeah. What is your role there? Are you like hands-on grower? Do you do sourcing or?
No, I do all kinds of things.
Okay.
I work really closely with our R&D team.
Mm-hmm.
And so I help weigh in from a home gardener perspective on like new plant introductions and services. Of course, I do a lot of writing, so I help produce all of the email newsletters. I work really closely with the website team on producing content there. And then I also work with research, and so putting out surveys to be able to gather, what the home gardener really wants to make sure that Costa Farms is delivering.
Yeah. Um, I imagine during COVID and even before COVID, people, I think, or I think it ramped up definitely during COVID, but there was already a ramp up to houseplants a few years before COVID. And then I think COVID just sent it into this whole other world. But working at a university, houseplants are still huge, especially with the younger generation. Have you seen just a steady pace, or have you guys been able to catch your breath from COVID craziness?
Yeah, yes, happily we have caught our breath. It's stable. It's not rising as meteorically as it
Mm-hmm.
it was during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
where we just couldn't grow enough plants to keep up.
It's just crazy. Yeah, and especially aeroids. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure you guys were just all over trying to find the next. I mean, still trying to find the next house plant, but the next
So
aeroid, which is crazy. And personally, I couldn't tell the difference between a Thai constellation and some of the other ones.
I know, and it's really complicated too because to some degree it's home gardeners, to some degree it's other growers, but different variations they're giving different names to, even though it's really the same plant,
Okay, that's good to hear it. That it's
and
yeah,
really muddying the waters.
yes, yes. Um, Yeah. So, but you guys, there's houseplants, but there's also tropical. So if you look to see, there's plants that be grown outside. So when you say home gardeners, it's you cover a wide range of tropical plants, and of course, if you're in a higher zone than a zone 10. All these could be grown outside. So, we say houseplants, but it really depends on which zone you're in. Um, so,
And if you're in the Southeast, we also grow kind of the traditional annuals and perennials.
oh, okay. Okay.
We have a farm in South Carolina where we grow things like echinacea, aster, hellebore.
Okay.
And then a farm in North Carolina where we grow pansies and petunias, violas, sunflowers, and all of those traditional bedding plants.
Okay. You don't have a facility out west, though, do you?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Oh,
I hope
okay.
someday.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be fun. I mean, it's wholesale, but I would finagle my way in. Oh, just kidding. So where did the love of passion vine? So your love of tropicals, love of plants started when you were very young. And I mean, people love passion vines. When you see a passion flower of any variety, you just sort of stop in your tracks because it is one of the most unusual, impressive type flowers. And, here where I'm at zone 9, there are some that, a lot will just overwinter. And, I actually had to pull one out because it just started taking over my whole entire garden, where I've had others freeze down. But where did that love start from?
Exactly what you said. I remember the first time I saw one, I thought, what the heck is that?
Mm-hmm.
It feels like it belongs undersea or a space alien or something, and as a relatively young kid, that was just so cool. And then the more I learned about them, the more fascinating they became. And there's just an incredible amount of science and evolution within this genus that the appearance is only scratching the surface to how wonderfully wild and cool they are.
Oh, are they? So they're tropical, but how broad is their natural distribution?
So the farthest north, their native range goes is actually like Missouri and Illinois.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There are 2 species that are hardy to USDA Zone 5/6. One is Passiflora incarnata.
Okay.
And
Yes.
then the other one is Passiflora lutea.
Lutea. Okay. So I imagine that is a yellow. Is that lutea?
Yeah, it's kind of a greenish yellow.
Okay. Okay.
Flowers aren't huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of the more common varieties in cultivation have variegation on their foliage, so it's a little splashier and more fun.
Okay. So most of the showy ones that we see are going to be cultivars, hybridized ones.
Yes. Yep.
And because we have some species ones at the conservatory, and as you expect, the flowers are not that crazy structure, intense colors that most people are familiar with, but they're still beautiful in their own way, of course. And so what other countries are they native to?
So their native range goes all the way from like Illinois, Missouri, all the way down through southern South America.
Okay. All right.
And then you've got a couple of random species that are native to Australia and a small handful that are native to Asia. But by and large, they're native to the New World.
Okay. Yeah. See, for some reason in my head, I was thinking more Asia, more of sort of that almost cloud forest, but makes sense that they actually like the warmth, except for the few that you've mentioned. Now, when you're looking,
Well, and then,
Go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Within Passiflora too, it's also really interesting because you do have a number of species that are native to the cloud forests of South America.
Okay. Yeah.
Even though they're not hardy, they cannot withstand high temperatures, especially at night. So there's a wide range of Passiflora that I can't grow in Miami, for example.
Interesting. Just because they don't like those nighttime
It's too hot.
temps. Got it. It's too hot. Okay. Whereas we have problems growing them sometimes because it's too hot but dry. That's the sun will cook them. That we don't have those humidity. And then of course in the winter, if we get a hard freeze, sometimes that will kill some off. So when you're looking at a flower, are they perfect flowers? I've never really looked at. So I try to stay away because I know they're called passion vines because it has this religious connotation. I know nothing about religion whatsoever. So, I always try to look at flowers and look at it from a scientist point of view, but sort of point out some of the structures that we're seeing because there's a lot going
Yes.
on.
Yeah. There's a ton going on. The most obvious and interesting characteristic is they have what are called corona filaments coming out. And the corona filaments can be long and kind of spiky, or they can be soft and frilly and kind of crimped.
Okay. So those are those like thin, like exactly what you said, filaments coming out that almost gives it that sea anemone look.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm. And then right in the center is the style, right, where it pops up. I imagine that's the style.
Yeah.
So they are perfect. And can they
Yes.
self-pollinate themselves or do they require cross-pollination?
It depends on the variety.
Okay.
There are a handful that are self-fertile,
Mhm.
but a lot of them are not self-fertile.
Okay. That just like a lot of plants just ensures that you get your genetics across. And then
Exactly. Yep.
and because it is, it doesn't necessarily have like obvious pollen. It doesn't necessarily have like a pollen tube, but I imagine nectar is what most of the pollinators are seeking when they go to it.
Well, they are really excuse the language here, but they are really smart in that the stigma has a good amount of nectar.
Okay.
But then the anthers, they face down.
Uh-huh.
And so like bumblebees and some of those pollinators actually crawl and they brush them with their backs
Okay. Okay. So
to spread the pollen from plant to plant.
got it. Okay. So yeah, it has a huge landing pad, so it is probably going to be um something that's a large insect that's going to be able to land on it and then of course just brush the pollen on its back. So,
Exactly.
okay.
Although with a group this large,
Mhm.
there are also hummingbird pollinated species and a
Ah.
couple that are nocturnal that are bat pollinated.
Oh, okay. We do have I should have does la- I can get a Lasiocarpa. Does that sound like familiar? Passiflora Lasiocarpa? I could be just making that up. Sometimes I do that. But we have
Lasiocarpa is ringing a bell, but I'm not connecting it to Passiflora off the top of my
okay,
head.
okay. That's what happens sometimes. But we have this white, almost pendulous shaped flower, Passiflora. So I could see where a nocturnal hovering, almost like a moth, or could pollinate it because it doesn't have that open flat. Like the petals don't completely open out. It looks more like a bell. So I
Yeah.
could see it definitely being pollinated at night by a moth versus, hummingbird or a bumblebee during the day. So, yeah. So it just goes to show you that it's not always just like a one type of pollinator, which is good. You need multiple
Yeah.
pollinators.
With this group, you can't really generalize one type of anything.
Yeah.
It is wild and crazy all the way around.
Yeah. Now, something that there was a passion vine collector in the town I live in. I live in I work at UC Davis, and I've never talked to her. I've just always went, oh my gosh, how the heck does she do that? Because she collects passion vines as well, and she briefly mentioned, oh no, a lot of the fruits on passion vines are toxic, and then some, of course, are edible. Is there a way? And then, I get sent questions like, oh, can I eat this one? Can I eat this one? And I know for the most part, cerulean, edulous, I know what those look like. But is it true? Are some of the fruits on passion vines toxic?
There are a couple.
Okay.
There is only one Passiflora that is known to have killed a person.
Great. Okay. And what do you know the chemical in it? Is it like a cyanide or what?
It is cyanide.
It is cyanide. Okay.
And sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, and this is one of the most crazy cool facts to me, is that there are some Passiflora that they found that have 7 different cyanide compounds in them.
Wow.
Because they are there are some specific species of butterflies that use them as host plants.
Uh-huh.
And in this long evolution of chemical warfare, the Passiflora said, okay, I'm developing the cyanide compound. I've got you hungry caterpillar.
Mm-hmm.
And through evolution, the caterpillar learns to metabolize over generations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, isn't that just insane?
That's insane. I mean, we know there's a fact that there's 7 different types of cyanide, but that these caterpillars have been able to evolve with them. And so I'm drawing a blank because I know they're a host plant for butterflies. We have, if you ever have a passion vine and it's just devoured, I always tell people it's fine. I think ours is the fritillary butterfly. Just the caterpillars just go on it and just eat it all. But I don't know if that's one that has cyanide in it.
It depends on the species.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Most Passiflora do have some cyanide compounds in their foliage.
Okay.
And yeah, Gulf fritillary
Yes.
caterpillars have learned to metabolize. Here in South Florida, we actually have 3 species: Julia butterflies, as well as zebra longwings, that
Okay.
will also munch the plants like crazy.
Okay. So then the ones that have the toxic fruit, the cyanides then are in the seeds. It just happens to be and then the other ones, I guess, have not in the seeds.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Not to freak people out. People are like, oh my God, I can't eat passion fruits because there's cyanide in them. But
No, it's mostly the foliage where you get the highest concentrations.
Okay. What
And
go ahead.
oh, sorry. And in general, and this is by no means like official medical advice or anything, but in general, Passiflora, if they have bad tasting fruit,
Uh-huh.
they have more of the bad compounds in them.
Okay.
It's not like they want to trick you and say, hey, this is really delicious, now it's going to kill you.
Yeah. Okay. So if it's good, if you find it yummy, chances are it's not going to kill you. Now, I know when I had a cerulean, I believe it was, or was it edulous, but it would produce so much fruit that the fruit, for it to be ripe, sort of has to wrinkle and fall off, I believe.
Yes. Yep.
For it to be ripe. Yes. And it did. It fell off. There's a lot. There's a lot. I really like them, but what are your favorite passion vines? What do you think ones are sort of underutilized? Or am I just
there is a variety called Sunburst
Mm-hmm.
that I think is just all the way fun. It has some variegation to the foliage. It has orange flowers.
Oh.
It doesn't have a great fragrance.
I didn't know I didn't even
Smells
know.
kind of like mothballs.
Okay. Oh, okay. That's really bad. I didn't even know that passion vines actually had a fragrance.
Yes, yeah, there's some.
Okay.
My favorite fragrance species is called Moriana.
Moriana. Okay.
And the flower looks kind of like a miniature cerulean.
Okay.
The foliage is kind of glaucous blue green, and I call it like a bird foot shape,
Got
where
it.
there's a
Yep.
long central lobe and
Mhm.
then two lobes sort of jutting out at an angle to the side.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, the fragrance reminds me a lot of lilac in the north.
Oh, nice. Ooh,
It's a light, sweet fragrance.
I like
It's
that.
not heavy. It's not cloying.
Yeah, that sounds nice. And you mentioned the leaves, and it's true. There's quite a diverse range of leaves on passion vines. You have that sort of that trifoliate shape. Then you have your entire margin where it looks like quote, sort of standard leaf. And then we had one at work called the bat leafed passion vine, where the leaves looked like wings and they were pretty dark as well. We lost that because I stupidly moved it outside into our shade house and didn't move it back inside for the winter, and it did not handle the cold there. So I've been trying to source that one, but they have a very distinct, different leaf. So people are just like, well, that's not a passion vine because that leaf doesn't look like my leaf. I use the leaves when people send them in to sort of help ID, because sometimes the flowers, especially if they're purple, look very similar.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. The leaves definitely help. Some will produce what they call extrafloral nectaries,
Mm-hmm. I was going to mention that.
um,
Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah.
which is also a great identifier, like how they're placed, how many there are on a petiole or on a leaf.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not familiar, the audience, with extrafloral nectaries, this is another cool thing they do is they will produce nectar like on the petiole or on the leaf itself to attract ants, so that the ants will protect the plant from the caterpillars
Is that it?
eating it.
Okay. Okay. So it's to ward off the caterpillars eating them.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. And then talking about foliage, another incredibly fascinating thing is that a number of Passiflora species, like one of my favorites that does this is called Bonderai,
Mm-hmm.
after Ron Bonder of Butterfly World in Florida. Um, they develop what they call egg spots, where there's a variegation pattern on the leaf,
Uh-huh.
the size and the shape of butterfly eggs in a
Interesting.
straight line going up the leaf, and it looks to the butterfly when it's flying by like another butterfly already got to that one, so I better not lay my eggs there.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I always tell people when we have like spots on plants that we don't always know sometimes why. And some, of course, times it's selected out, but that's pretty amazing that it's a defense mechanism for that. That's pretty fun. I
I
love
know.
stories like that.
I do wonder how, like, it almost feels like there has to be a level of knowledge there for the plant to say this is the size, the shape, and the color
Well,
of
yeah,
the spot to replicate an egg.
I know, because you think, okay, what are the chances of a plant just randomly mutating and forming those spots and then having that selected out? It's like
Exactly.
how many grew with larger spots and that didn't quite do the trick. Uh, so I mean, and the time for the selection and for that random mutation to happen for then that to work. Um, it's pretty amazing. I mean,
It really, really is.
yeah, because that every plant defense, I'm like, my God, how long did that take? It had to have just been this random thing occur, and then it worked, and then everything just fell into place. It's amazing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's and especially also that interaction with bugs and pests or whatever. It's very fascinating. So I'm gonna have to look for that one. What's the name of that one? Bone
Bonderai.
Bonderi.
Bonderi.
Right. Okay. Do you grow any? And so I'm going to start trends. I mean, unless you have something more to, I mean, I could probably talk about passion vines, but I do want to utilize your time and talk about some houseplant tips too, because people, you're the person to ask. Do you grow any? Well, you're in Miami, so of course you don't need to grow any inside necessarily, but could someone try growing a passion vine inside? Do you think there's any species, any varieties?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, really?
So back
Okay.
when I lived in Minnesota and Iowa,
Mm-hmm.
I did have a number that I kept indoors as houseplants because I was too lazy to haul them in and out every summer.
Okay.
Um, Typically, the smaller species are easier to grow indoors just because they're more manageable.
Yeah.
So like there's a little yellow variety called citrina.
Citrina. Okay.
There's a little pink variety called sanguinolenta.
Oh, might have to ask you for these and then write them out. Okay. Okay. And when you say
Um,
smaller, just the plant itself will stay a little more compact, not grow as crazy.
Correct. Yeah. So instead of wanting to grow 60 feet in their native
Uh-huh.
habitat, they may
Yeah.
only grow, 18 feet in their
Okay.
native habitat,
Okay.
which if you're scaling to an indoor environment, that usually keeps them like 6, 8 feet
Uh-huh. And
without pruning.
you managed to get them to bloom inside.
Yes. In Iowa, I was blessed enough I was living in an old farmhouse
Mm.
with 6 foot tall windows.
Okay.
So I had plenty of natural light streaming in.
And that was south facing or
Yeah, yeah, all four directions.
okay. Got
And
it.
then when I started to get too crazy with tropicals, I also bought some ballasts and set up a plant room in my basement.
Okay. Got it. And then with the lights, with supplemental light in the basement, you got them to bloom as well?
Yep, yep.
Wow. Okay. That's really nice to hear. Now, another question, and um, they bloom on new growth. So say someone has to prune one back, they'll bloom on that year's growth. Is that correct?
Most of them, yes. There
Okay.
are a couple of species that do have the ability to sprout flowers directly off of the wood,
Mm.
um, on old wood.
Oh, that's interesting. Sort of like I'm just picturing like some of the tree aristolochias or even like chocolate, what it does.
Exactly. Yep,
Okay.
exactly like
Okay.
that.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, people who, I mean, a lot of times they die down and then the next year you get flowers. So that's why I assumed that it was mostly, um, most of them do form on new growth because of that. But if someone's trying to grow it inside and they have to cut it back for manage, it's nice to know that they haven't, set themselves back by a year.
Nope,
But I'm going to have to
nope, not at all.
look for those because that would be fun to grow a passion vine inside. Of course, I don't, the foliage, I don't want my cats eating the foliage. So for me, maybe not. So with the cyanide, that's probably not so good.
No,
Yeah.
no, no. Your cats probably don't have generations of cyanide resistance built up.
No, 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 they do not. They're very sensitive, fragile kitties. uh, so moving on. So let's move on to house plants now, talking about sort of what you do at Costa Farms. And growing house plants, you were all into tropicals. There's a few areas I want to hit on, and I usually ask people this question because it varies so greatly from person to person. But say you have, I don't know, let's see, an anthurium. What is your go-to soil for an anthurium at home?
So I usually buy sorry, and I'm trying to think of a better way to say this, but I'll just say right out. Just the general Vigoro potting mix at Home Depot.
Okay.
I am not one of those guys who mixes soil and has a different mix
Okay.
for all of my different plants.
Interesting. So for an anthurium, it's just that's the straight soil you use.
Yep, exactly. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
I know a lot of people, especially in the houseplant world, get into the idea that this plant needs that soil mix and
Uh-huh.
that plant needs, another kind. Um, but it's really much more about moisture management than it is media type.
I was just about to say, it really depends. And this is, I stress this to so many people too, because I mean, sure, you get the same question as how much should I water my houseplant? And then that opens up a huge, leads to a billion other questions. But the main one is, well, what type of soil are you growing it in? And so I imagine with the soil, and I'm trying to remember if I've used that soil before, but it has more, definitely more organics in it than other soils. So you probably have to water less, I'm guessing.
Yes. Yeah, and I suspect that because that's like a Home Depot house brand,
Uh-huh.
that they're probably pulling in from different manufacturers in different regions rather than mass.
Yeah.
So what I have here in South Florida may be very different than what you have in California.
Okay.
Um,
That makes
but I
sense.
know mine has some core in it. It has some sand.
Oh,
It has some bark in it. Um,
okay. So it has a little, some aeration in it that
yes, yeah, yeah,
anthuriums would
yeah. It
like.
has a decent amount of aeration.
Okay. Okay. Now, since you work at a nursery that does wholesale, I'm always telling people that when they buy a house plant, the number one thing they need to do is first always find, if it should have a name on it, find out where that plant's native to, because that's going to sort of help you figure out how to grow it. And two, absolutely always get it out of the soil that it came in because and no fault of the nurseries, it's when you're pumping out this many plants, you need to have a soil that's going to retain enough moisture for transport. A lot of times you probably start your cuttings of these plants in the same pot that possibly it's going out in. So it's utilized as a cutting material as well as for a rooted plant, and cost wise and just the of obtaining the material. And so usually I'm guessing you guys use a pretty straightforward peat soil.
No, for sustainability reasons primarily, we have phased out peat.
Okay. That's another question I
We
was going to ask. Yeah.
we we rely mainly on core,
Okay. So,
and then we work with a manufacturer who recycles um, or upcycles a wood product here in the southeast.
okay.
And so there's a high percentage of shredded wood in the
Ah,
mix as well.
okay.
That adds a great amount of aeration.
Okay.
Um,
So,
and so if if you have good moisture management, there's
mhm.
no reason that you have to transplant.
Okay. You just ruined everything I tell people. No, just kidding. No.
Well, that it comes down to moisture management,
Yeah.
and I
Mhm.
know a lot of home gardeners who absolutely hate the potting mix that we use.
Okay. Yeah.
And they say it's too dense.
Mhm.
It doesn't drain well enough, and I don't want to sound like a bad guy when I respond, but
Uh-huh.
it's because they're watering more than
Yeah.
is appropriate for that
Yeah.
soil.
Yeah. No, and it does get that. But I find that most people, and I'm sure you do too, most people kill their houseplants by overwatering. So,
100%, yeah.
so generally, it's when you have a heavy soil, they just like kill the roots off right away. But no, that's great that you guys have moved on to away from peat, and I think more I think they're trying to actually. I think it was the UK. Are they banning it soon? And so
Yeah,
it's
they're working on, I think,
yeah.
by 26.
Wow. Yeah. And we've moved peat out of our basic potting soil, but we have a huge carnivorous plant collection that there's no substitute really because everything else has
No.
too many salts. So we definitely still need to get peat soil. So I mean I don't know if they were to ban it in the US what we would do. Um
I can't imagine that it would ever be banned here.
yes.
The logistics, with Canada.
Exactly. We'd be going across the border illegally smuggling it back, the carnivorous plant growers. We'd be like arrested for peat smuggling. We'd have like tunnels underneath the borders and give me my peat. Okay, so then you also add wood products. So there is a lot more aeration. So that's good to know that you know, that you guys just aren't, you've looked at sustainability, you looked at aeration, and a lot of most of your plants are going to be tropical, so they can handle that if someone is watering correctly, I guess we should say.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Most of the growers who take plants home don't repot their plants when they bring them,
Okay.
and I can say from personal experience, I never repot any of my Costa Farms plants until they become root bound.
Okay. All right.
And with some varieties, in my role, it's important to know about plants so that I can really communicate to the home gardener.
Mhm.
Sometimes I will let plants get really, really root bound
Mhm.
just to see their tolerance. And even being in the container 5 years with this potting mix,
Mhm. Yeah. It
it
it's not broken down completely.
it breaks down quite a bit.
Yeah.
I had a pothos before I moved that I could see way more roots than I should.
Yeah, it was funny. You're like, oh, sometimes I let them get right. I mean, I guess I'm going to start using that as my excuse for killing plants. Sometimes I even kill plants just to see why. I'll just start saying it's an experiment.
Exactly. It's important to know, what the thresholds are.
It is,
That
and I tell people that sometimes with watering. It's like sometimes if they're so afraid of water, I said, I hate to say this, if it's a leafy plant, let it wilt one time. Count between days. You'll know how, the first plant that will wilt and just remember how many days. You don't want it to continuously wilt because you're killing off all the little fine root hairs, but water it one day before if it wilted on day 5, make sure you water every 4th day. Versus, just adding water and water and water and drowning it to death. So, you know, sometimes we underwater plants at work. All the students who water, I say during the wintertime, err on the side of watering more. In the wintertime, err on the side of not watering the plant. So, um,
That's great advice. Yeah.
it's just a big generalization, but our soil at work is we're on the side of where we have so many different soil mixes. So
Oh, I bet.
and our soil is pretty much almost all inorganic because we have to err on the side of having various students water and they get distracted and our plants will drown to death. So that's the soil you use, and it's I'm gonna have to go get a bag and see exactly what's in it and how aerated it is. And what is your go-to fertilizer routine?
So I tend to like the time release fertilizers.
Okay.
And again, it kind of comes down to this general sense of laziness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I respect that.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
sprinkling some time release in, every couple of months in spring and summer.
Okay. And
And
it's like an Osmocote type.
exactly, yep.
Okay. Okay. At Costa Farms, do you guys do fertigation? Is your fertilizer run through your irrigation?
No, and
No.
that's another part of the sustainability
Uh-huh.
is that we don't want anything excess running out the drainage holes into the groundwater,
Okay.
and so like all of our plants in Miami are fertilized with time release fertilizer.
Oh, okay. So there's absolutely no wasted fertilizer, really. Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
The water table is so high here.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah. Oh, yeah. When do you start the fertilizer process? Once things start have the roots on them? Because you do most things by cuttings. Am I correct?
Cuttings or tissue culture, depending on the species.
Ah,
There's a
okay.
small handful of varieties that we do from seed as well,
Okay. Okay.
but yeah, the vast majority is cuttings followed by tissue culture.
Okay. Oh my God. I don't want to get into the tissue culture thing because that's going to open up a whole other conversation. And I don't know if you're involved in that, but I have a tissue culture lab at my house. And it's been 2 years and I've yet to, we're doing, a coworker and I are trying to do rare Haworthias. So we started out with
Oh, nice.
some of the most difficult things to do. And all we've had is just callus after callus after callus. And we finally have our first set of true leaves. But it's been so long that we've lost track of what species of Haworthia it is. Because at this point, we're just like, okay, we just got to get something. But man, we were dumping that stuff with cytokinin in the last round. And our friend and coworker who manages our orchids is jumping on board and he just did some orchid seeds. So we'll see. Um, are you involved at all in the tissue culture aspect?
No, so and we don't actually do tissue culture ourselves. We
Okay.
work with labs around the world
Got it.
to source and
Okay.
really rely on their expertise.
Yeah.
Our expertise is as a grower.
Okay. Yeah. Because once they get it dialed in, they just mass produce that. Um, so that's good that you guys have all these sort of sustainable practices in place. We would love to do organic fertilizers at work and one day soon maybe, but just the cost and really it's just we just haven't gotten there yet. And we're not lined up like a nursery where we could just put slow release in certain plants, because we have just 4,000 different species. So that means like 4,000 different types of plants. So it's just sort of a hodgepodge of them.
Yeah, and for us, it works out, yeah, very, very differently because we're planting a crop of, I don't know, say 300 at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's easy enough to just put them in there, put the fertilizer in there, and then move them out. When I worked at wholesale, it's just sort of like this assembly line process. So so one of the biggest questions I get, especially with Calatheas, Marantas being huge. Do you guys grow a lot of those?
Yes.
Ugh,
Yep.
I think you might be one of the nurseries. I might be like, oh, they look perfect when they come out of the greenhouse. And then I tell people it's not you, it's them, meaning the plant. Because am I correct in that is a very high humidity loving plant, and unless the humidity is perfect, and even with your older lower leaves are going to have brown edges as they age, they're going to look bad. That's fine, that's normal. But they're high humidity loving plant. And a lot of times people don't have that humidity in the house. So they end up getting these just brown edges, curled leaves even. Am I
Well,
correct?
you're mostly on, but there is a caveat there.
Okay.
I have found from personal experience
Uh-huh.
that humidity and moisture management are closely tied.
Okay. Yeah.
And the more dialed in moisture management is,
Mm-hmm.
the less important humidity is.
Okay.
And so if you're growing them like in a good self-watering system,
Okay.
40% humidity shouldn't be too much of an issue.
All right. Says the person
But
coming from Miami. What about 20% humidity?
well, I mean, keep in mind, I grew up in northern Minnesota where
That's true.
where the
Yeah.
furnace was going constantly.
That's true. And you had good looking calatheas and marantas?
I wasn't into calatheas
Okay.
back then. Marantas, I had a couple of the good old fashioned prayer plants.
Okay. Okay.
I didn't have a self-watering system, true, but um, I did spend 3 years. Actually, I just moved back to Miami in March of 2023. I did spend 3 years in Portland, Oregon,
Oh, okay.
working remotely, and yeah, there was where I picked up the experience with the self-watering versus
Yeah.
manual watering and how much of a difference that can make.
And explain that. When you say self-watering, I picture like a self-watering pot watering from the bottom, but go through what you mean by that.
So Costa Farms, and I'm cheating because Costa Farms has a system
Okay.
that they call Wick and Grow,
Okay.
where there's a specially designed wick
Uh-huh.
that pulls moisture up from the soil, and traditional old school wicking
Yeah.
technology.
Like people used to do with
Um,
African violets.
yep.
Uh-huh.
But the material the wick is made from and the way that it's inserted into the soil,
Okay.
makes a big difference in from some of the just old school wicking where there's a little bit of wick in the bottom of the pot.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you don't water from the top and the wick,
Got
the
it.
Costa Farm system has worked really beautifully for me. I've never run into overwatering with something,
Okay.
which I
Yeah.
know a lot of people have fears of.
Yeah.
Uh,
So the idea is that there's a reservoir underneath.
yep,
You
exactly.
put the water there, ideally bottled water if you have horrible tap water, because and then the wick it's just going to pull it up when the soil is dry.
Exactly. It's osmosis.
Yeah.
As the root is pulling moisture from the soil, the
Mm-hmm.
wick is replenishing just that same amount.
Okay.
So there's a nice balance.
Yeah. I think when people don't see the top of the soil moist, that's when they freak out and then water from the top as well.
Yes.
And when I
Yep.
say people, I mean me.
Oh, you're definitely not alone in that.
Yeah, it's just, and that's probably the reservoir of water isn't enough, or it's not as dry as you think, and the plant doesn't need to pull up as much water as you think.
Exactly. Yeah. The surface doesn't necessarily need to be moist
Mhm.
for the root zone to
Yeah.
be, in an optimal position.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And so the pot, and that's, are those pots sold separately, or is every pot that you buy like from? That's not every pot that you buy
No,
has that. You have to
no,
buy it separate.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
So far, there's just one retailer, Lowe's,
Okay.
that is doing the wick and grow,
Okay.
and we offer both plants with just the wick in them,
Uh-huh.
as well as plants that are wicked with a reservoir pot.
Okay. So then you find that correct. I mean that is it's sort of like the plant's going to know, the soil is going to, when it dries, it's going to take the moisture up. So it sort of takes out the should I water my plant, not water my plant. And then with that, chances are the plant is probably going to be looks a little bit healthier and happier because it's getting the right amount of water. Because it's true, when you overwater a plant or underwater a plant, the brown edges, that's also going to be affected, because that's those are the cells that, if you're underwatering a plant, get the least amount of water, and you have that brown tip. And if you overwater a plant, we all know that you're killing off roots, and it acts and mimics like you're not watering the plant. So sometimes you get the same
Exactly. It can't
symptoms.
absorb enough
Yeah,
moisture.
so it can't. So you're going to get the same symptoms. So if you eliminate that, then the plant's going to just look that much better. So yeah, I really need to get back into doing that. I mean, it does save time watering. I think it's just that initial like setup, but there's pots out there that are already set up for it. That's nice. That's the lazy
And yeah,
gardener in me.
if you want me to send a sample, let me know and I can
Ooh.
arrange for one.
Ooh, that'd be fun. Yeah. I like trying new things. Okay, so that's humidity, because I've added a humidifier before, and what happened is, you have such gradients, which is fine. But all my begonias ended up with powdery mildew. And so I was fighting powdery mildew or brown edges on certain plants. And I'm like, well, I'd rather have a little bit of brown edges on my, this plant versus the powdery mildew. So I turned it off. And it is true. I think a lot of plants adapt to the humidity.
Yes. Yeah.
It could take a so the ficus, everyone knows the ficus benjamina, you bring it in, the leaves drop, and most people, I say it's number one plant probably in landfills because people think they killed it. Could it take a really long time for those new set of leaves to come back? But I find all plants need a really long adjustment period. Like even like the ficus, I'm sure you hear a lot of problems from people with that ficus, the fiddle leaf fig.
Hmm.
Yeah, the brown blotches, which is water issue, but also I find that it takes months for it to adapt to the humidity inside the house. I don't know if
It certainly can. Yes.
yeah, so I had the
You know,
variegated pink one, and
oh, sorry.
no, I was just saying I had the variegated pink one, and for months I had brown edges, and I'm like, okay, I know how to grow plants. What's going on here? And then just all of a sudden it just stopped, and I'm like, it must have been adapting to humidity.
Yeah, if you think about it, especially if it's Florida grown,
Mm-hmm.
there's the very specific conditions down in Florida,
Yeah.
and then it gets put in a dark truck, usually air conditioned to make sure it doesn't overheat. And depending how far you are from Florida, that can be up to 10 days.
Okay.
And then it gets unpacked at a retail store. And retail stores don't always have optimal environments for keeping plants.
No.
And some retail stores, if they're busy, the plants get unloaded in the back of the warehouse where it's not necessarily heated or cooled. Really, really low lighting conditions before they're brought out to the sales area.
Mm-hmm.
So your plant has gone through all of this, and then you bring it home and you're introducing it to a whole new environment that it has to figure out.
And it could take a while.
Yeah, absolutely. When we test new plants for like shipping,
Mm-hmm.
we look like at a 14-day period for most after the shipping has been completed, because it can take a solid 2 weeks for the plant to show that stress.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So a lot of times when people think, what am I doing? And then they're like, oh, I'm going to fertilize it and water it more. Just leave it be, let it adjust to the
Exactly.
new conditions.
The thing that makes me, and I understand the instinct, but saddest for people
Mm-hmm.
is when they bring the plant home, it's not doing what they want. So then they move it to the kitchen, and then a week later they're like, okay, I'm going to try the bedroom. And it's like,
Yeah.
you're inadvertently making it harder for the plant.
Yeah. Or they move it outside. I'm like, no, it's 110
Yes,
out.
exactly.
Don't do that. Or transplant it. So yeah, because these, even though we won't see them, is they are putting on different sort of sets of leaves, either with a thicker cuticle, less of a cuticle, or those leaves got so dried out that they're browning, they're going to fall off. Or some of the feeder roots might have died and they need to put new feeder roots on to really take up the nitrogen for growth to occur. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes of the plant that people don't see. So give it time. I always tell people when
Exactly.
I had someone who used to bring in just a sample of his plant every single day at a nursery I brought in every single day. Finally, I looked at him. I said, step away from your plant. Your homework is to not look at your plant for like a whole week. knowing that you watered it, just don't look at the plant. So,
Exactly.
uh, so, uh, when you're, do you have a whole department that is sourcing different plants, like looking for the next it plant, traveling the world, i.e., my dream job? I say that, but I
Yes.
actually am a
So
homebody.
we have a guy,
Uh-huh.
and his unofficial title is the plant hunter,
Okay. Okay.
and super duper exciting.
Yeah.
Is that I am training to take his place
Oh,
when he retires.
oh my gosh. How exciting. Yeah. Um, when's he retiring?
So we've got, we're looking at maybe a 3-year training period
Okay. Yeah.
before I'm on my own.
That is fun. And so, you're primarily tropics. So, of course, I mean, the tropics, there's huge, huge areas. What do you see? And I don't want you guys to give away all your trade secrets, but I called the begonia craze. Like, I didn't call the aroid craze because for me, that was, I'm just not a huge aroid fan. Um,
Mhm.
Unless they're really, my coworker just came back from, he's a succulent collector. And
Okay.
we just found a whole bunch of xerophytic aroids, and we're all excited about those.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So, but those are, obviously going to be very difficult to grow, and they're more for a succulent grower than a houseplant grower. But I called the begonia craze. I'm like, I bet begonias are coming next. And I did call the African violet craze about a year ago. It hasn't hit. So I'm waiting because variegated African violets are amazing. But do you guys have sort of a sense of pushing? I'm not saying pushing, but sort of sourcing what the next big it type plants are going to be?
So yeah, so we're certainly trying, and one of the things that people don't realize is that it takes a long time to launch a new plant.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
And a while ago, I saw a comment on Reddit
Uh-huh.
where somebody was interestingly complaining. They were a plant collector, and they're like, as soon as a plant becomes popular, Costa Farms is going to come out with it right away. And that actually made me so happy because it takes us 5 to 7 years to launch a new plant from the time we first source it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's a lot of trend work that we're doing, and
Oh,
instinct to
yeah.
be able to say, yep, this is this
Yes.
is going to be the right time.
So that obviously means you guys are pushing the trends then, because probably most people aren't aware that how many plants you guys are responsible for out there. I mean, I think you go to a lot of stores and it's your plants. Am I correct?
Yeah, we work with about 35,000
Oh
stores
my God.
across the United States.
Wow. Um, so going back to the plant hunting, do you, how does that, you sort of just, do you say, hey, I'm going to go to this area? And we should say this is done in 100% ethically, and in no way are you going in poaching and anything like that. I'm just going to
No,
put that.
no, no.
Yeah.
None of the plant hunting is done in the wild.
Okay.
It's
Yes.
all going to nurseries. It's all going to breeders. It's
Okay.
all going to sanctioned plant markets.
Yeah. It's not like,
Yeah.
the 1880s Victorian times where people just scooped up well, I mean, still happening, but, where everyone was just like, oh, dig up all those orchids for me so I could put them in my greenhouse.
Yeah, going into the jungles is not my dream job.
Yeah. Okay. So you're sourcing from other places that are already sort of, have growing information on it. So, really, and they're already propagating it. I
To
won't.
a degree.
Okay, to a degree.
Sometimes we will find something where the nursery doesn't exactly know what it is.
Ah, okay.
Um like Scindapsus trebui moonlight
Okay. I don't even
was
know it.
was
I know
was a case like
Synaptus.
that
Okay.
where back when Mike first found it,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't really have a name on it.
Mm,
We knew it was a Scindapsus.
yeah.
And by the time that we had built up enough stock of it to be able to release it. It had taken off in Europe,
Mm,
and it got the name Moonlight attached to it.
okay.
But we had internally been working with a different name, the last 7 years.
Got it. Okay. So you
So there's
released that.
weird stuff like that can happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you sort of just go not saying, hey, we're going to start this trend. We're going to try to source gesnerids, or we're going to try to source adeniums or something like that. You just go out and see what there is and see if it fits sort of the niche of what you guys are all about.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. We can't go looking for something in particular,
Yeah. Okay.
because we don't want to be jaded and lose an opportunity because we're not thinking about
Yeah. Yeah.
when we see it.
Yeah. No, I mean, that would be more difficult as well too, because yeah, you'd set yourself up for failure there. But I just see it as being like, ooh, I got this trend started. It's all going to be just, I don't know, some random. I
There
don't
was,
know.
yeah. An example that actually happened was Geogenanthus.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a plant that, of course, it's existed.
Uh-huh.
Um, and you could find it if you were a collector.
Uh-huh.
We brought it to market. We were the first ones to really bring
Oh,
it
okay.
to mass market
Okay.
in North America.
Okay. The
The first time. What's
popa,
that?
what the species popa, I can never
No,
pronounce
no,
it.
we did the other
Oh,
one.
you did
We're
the other
doing the
one.
Ciliatus
Okay. Okay. Okay.
with that dark purple
Uh-huh.
kind of alien looking leaf.
Yeah. 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 Okay.
Um, and it's the first time in something like 30 years that there's been a new genus introduced into mainstream houseplants.
Oh, how fun.
And New York Times wrote about it. So, that really did feel like it started a new trend, because it wasn't out there for the average person.
Yeah, and that's a great plant too. Yeah. Well, see, that's fun. That's fun. That's you just came, you guys came across that, recognized for what it's worth. I'm sure you had to make sure. I mean, how long is the trial period before you put it to market?
Trials are often about 3 years, and then there's another 2 to 4 or 5 years of building up enough mother plants.
Okay. What's a plant that you absolutely cannot stand anymore? And you could be honest.
Um,
Which one are you so sick of hearing about, or we're so harassed about? Like, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this?
it may make people not love me,
Yeah.
but I'm kind of over the hype with pink Prince of
I knew
Philodendron.
you were going to say that. I knew it. And if I told you that was one of the very few aeroids that I actually like, because I love pink before Barbie came. Yeah, that's so funny.
It's a gorgeous plant.
It is, but it was so in demand. Yeah.
And it's crazy because it's been around since the 70s. It's not a new plant.
Most of these are not new plants, but they're new to this generation, and they're new to, and they were stopped. And they were so priced. And then as soon as they managed to tissue culture, then the prices went down like crazy. So I feel bad for everyone who is buying these high priced aeroids. I refer to them as like the Beanie Babies of the world. It's like, guys, the value isn't necessarily there. And then sure enough, places are able to tissue culture them and propagate them in larger quantities. And, my personal feeling is no plant should ever be rare. And I know these weren't truly rare. This was sort of market rare. But if you guys were responsible for bringing it to mass market, I want to thank you.
And there was a fair amount of drama around it internally as well.
Oh, okay. Oh,
That also made me, kind of feel like I'm over it.
okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, I could definitely see that one. Yeah, we have one in one of our students just gave it to us, and I'm like, well, it's pink. I like it. We could have it in there. But luckily, people still go crazy over the variegated monstera more than the pink princess. And, I just don't get the variegated monstera either. I don't know.
That one I personally love.
Okay. Okay.
But there is so much internal drama at Costa Farms about that
In,
I
okay,
I
I won't
hesitate to even
ask.
say it out loud.
Really, the variegated monstera,
Yes.
internal drama. Oh
Yes.
my gosh.
Well, and yeah, it was very public drama for a while
Oh,
as
I
well.
missed it. I think I stayed clear of all the drama. Can you sort of allude to it? Were some people saying it was a different, um, or like you shouldn't
No,
propagate it, or what was?
even worse than that is so we were working with a lab
Uh huh.
and thought that there was a different way to do the tissue culture
Uh huh.
that would make it much easier for us to be able to bring it to market at scale.
Okay.
That ended up not coming to fruition,
Mm-hmm.
but Costa Farms had already announced it.
Oh. Uh-oh.
And so everybody was excited, and there was this idea that, okay, this 1,200 plant I'm going to be able to go to Home Depot and get for $50 now.
Yeah.
And it never really panned out from the lab.
Okay.
We had a ton of mother plants that we were building up stock of, so that when the time came, we could
Mm-hmm.
send all of these cuttings to the lab and get all the plantlets back.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were working with the mother plants, and the cutting propagated plants, and a couple of retailers decided that they really needed to do market tests with them.
Okay.
And so we released small batches to retailer X, retailer Y, and of course it blew up on social media, so everybody knew,
Uh-huh.
and everybody knew that we had some.
Yeah.
And so then there were all these conspiracy theories about, Costa Farms is holding it back to make the prices go up,
Ah.
and then when it got to the point where it's like, okay, we're not going to be able to get what we need from the lab,
Mm-hmm.
we had to announce it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Oh,
And so people had been waiting and they felt betrayed, and I totally understand why.
I mean, things happen. I mean,
Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
it's live plants.
yeah.
Any number of things could happen, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, this was something that we shouldn't
Mhm.
have.
Yeah, jump
Um,
the gun a little, yeah, a little too
exactly.
soon. I mean, it wasn't like a Theranos thing where you just did not have the, the it was all lies. It was there. It just wasn't on, yours. It basically who you're contracting with couldn't figure out. They couldn't figure out their side of it. So
Yeah, and there's more to it that I can't talk
that's
about.
fine. Yeah, I'm surprised.
That
Yeah.
that makes so much more sense to the story. But
Okay. Okay. That's fine. I don't want to, but speaking, because I missed all that because I try to stay away. Thank goodness I wasn't all the drama in that. Um, so do you guys sell variegated monster? Do you sell it?
no,
Okay. Okay. Because I was going to
um,
ask you if you did a 1 node or 2 node cutting, but I'll ask you, what do you feel about 1 node or 2 node cuttings of aeroids?
personally, I would always go with two.
Yes.
Just
Thank you.
you know, it you know you you have that much more chance of success.
Yeah, when I see these people buying 1 node cuttings, a student will come to me and say, I bought this 1 node cutting of this. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, really? How much did you buy? I'm like, yeah. So I insist that we had, we have 2 variegated monsteras and we did the same thing. We propagated them and I insisted on 2 node cuttings minimum. And then we got, I mean, we're small scale. I mean, we're obviously not, we got about, I think, 25 plants. And then, word got out and we didn't know how to sell them. And we're like, how are we even going to sell these? We can't do like a lottery. We can't do a first come. We're going to be mobbed. And what do we sell them at? We feel weird selling them because, we're a university. And finally, we just let students take them home.
Oh,
So,
nice.
so I'm just like, I don't want to get into the drama of this. So, um, man, I could talk to you all day about plants and the business, but I don't want to keep you too long. But anything else you want to say about Costa Farms, any important houseplant tips that I just completely missed out? I mean, we touched upon, I think, some pretty big ones in how you grow and then how Costa Farms grows and or anything on passion vines or anything in general.
One thing I would like to circle back on,
Mm-hmm.
water gets so much attention with plant care,
Yeah.
but really light is the single most important thing. Light is the
Mm-hmm.
foundation basically for everything else.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
You were talking about like potting mix being a major factor and how much to water.
Mm-hmm.
And I always go to light even before that.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean,
Because
100%.
the more
Yeah.
light the plant has, the more fuel it has,
Mm-hmm.
the more it grows, the faster it's going to pull moisture from the soil.
Mm-hmm.
The more light it has, the more fertilizer it's going to want, need, or respond to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And light is something that too it's really tragically misunderstood by a lot of people, especially beginners.
Yeah. No, and you're 100% correct. And probably what I did is I probably just assume everyone has their plant in the correct light, which I shouldn't do because we all know that's not the case. And then I went to soil. But yeah, if you don't have your plant in the correct light, your plant's not going to make it. It's going to be stressed and it won't matter what your soil is in. And so what do you tell people about trying to find the best light situation? Because it's hard to explain light. I had some artists from Campus Museum come and they're using plants in installation and they're trying to tell me how bright it was. Finally, I'm like, let me just go there and see what you're talking about. Because sometimes someone's idea of bright isn't necessarily your idea of bright.
Exactly. One of my jobs is to work on plant tags.
Mm-hmm.
And with the really limited real estate we have,
Yeah.
I have never been able to figure out a way to adequately communicate light,
Yeah. On a
because
tag.
it is
Yeah.
not it's not a two-line concept,
Mm-mm.
but that's all the space we have on plant tags.
Yeah.
And so for bright light, I usually tell people that the plant will cast a pretty strong shadow most of the day.
Okay.
It's really easy to look at light at any single point,
Mm-hmm.
but it has a cumulative effect on plants.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so you really need to look at it as a day long thing, not just okay. It has 45 minutes of direct sun on it,
Yeah.
and the rest of the day, it doesn't. Therefore, it's in bright light.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people bring their plants outside for an hour or so.
Yes,
That
yeah,
always
and that's so
surprised.
tough.
Yeah, it's so tough on plants, but I do like the idea of actually looking for the shadows because that limits the because if you tell someone, "Oh, put it on the south side," that doesn't work because you could have a skyscraper next to you with a tree and never open your blinds and they're like, "Ah, it's facing south." Then there's
Yeah.
people who have no idea what
What?
south is.
Yeah. When I lived in Portland, Oregon,
Uh-huh.
my home office, there was a big oak right outside the window,
Mhm.
and it was why am I blanking? It was an east-facing window.
Yeah.
So during the winter, it got a lot of really beautiful morning light.
Yeah.
During the summer, it got very little natural
Yeah.
light.
Yeah.
And so even something like that, you're sort of throwing the traditional rule on its head.
Yeah. And then, yeah, like you
That
said, changing the seasons. South is great in
Mhm.
winter. South in the summertime could cook your plants.
Yeah, and if you've got a south-facing window in Miami, it's very different than a south-facing window in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So many factors.
Yeah. So the shadow effect is good. So if it's like a plant needs bright light all for, most of the day, there should be a defined shadow it's casting. For something that's
Mhm.
low light, you may not see any shadow at all.
Yep.
I'm trying to
And
think.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so then the how much is enough but not enough
Uh-huh.
gauge that we try to use is, if you're looking at like a book or a magazine,
Uh-huh.
if you can read comfortably most of the day without having to turn on supplemental light, that's probably the minimum a low light tolerating
Hmm.
plant can handle.
Yeah, it doesn't
You
mean
know,
that it
and
wants to be in a closet environment.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And I always try to stress when I converse with people too,
Hmm.
there's a big difference between loving low light that they like to think and
Hmm.
tolerating low light, which
Yeah.
is the reality of it.
Yeah, because a lot of plants will tolerate low light for X amount of time, and then the stress just
Mhm.
gets to them, and then sometimes they show it uh, right away, and it's just this leggy growth, and other times, like succulents, they could just literally just collapse one day. It looks fine, and then the stress just gets to them, and bam, they're gone. So, yeah, that'd be hard to put all that to convey that on a tag. And someone who doesn't really look at tags much, but people who are starting out growing plants, the tag sometimes is their lifeline. They thank God there's
Yeah,
Google
absolutely.
now. If the name of the plant's there, they could Google, but then that information sometimes is you have to sift through a lot of misinformation. So, um,
And unfortunately, we are also not always able to put the name of a plant on a tag. I know that sounds like the most simple thing in the world.
yeah, why is that?
There are so many bizarre complexities with managing tags. I will sometimes tell people this is the hardest thing Costa Farms does is
Uh-huh.
manage tag inventory.
Oh my God.
Because different retailers require different tags.
Okay. Got it. Uh-huh.
Walmart has their tag, Lowe's has their tag, for
Uh-huh.
example.
Okay.
And so, a lot of retailers will we call it pre-book, but reserve a year or two ahead of time a quantity of plants that we're growing for them.
Mhm.
And that's all well and good until they decide, oh, I want 50,000 more of this.
Mhm.
And usually when those kind of requests come, it's not in time to be able to order new tags.
Got it. Okay. S
And then so then you start running into tag inventory issues.
mm.
And I really hate to say this because I know a lot of people despise this answer.
Uh-huh.
But at the end of the day, Costa Farms is a business,
Uh-huh.
and so it doesn't make sense to have millions of dollars of tag inventory sitting around just in case you need it.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, that makes sense. I mean, and I've always wondered, and I think what gets me the most is the cacti when you just see assorted succulent. Uh,
and cacti too is it used to be a very weird situation. Because Costa Farms didn't propagate a lot of its own cacti.
Mhm.
They were buying starts from suppliers.
Mm,
And you can't guarantee that what you ask for
it's
is
good.
what you actually get.
Got it. Okay.
And so, because the fulfillment could differ so and often
Mhm.
did differ so wildly,
Mhm.
it just doesn't make sense to have all of these tags that chances are 40% are going to be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the succulents got me because, you buy a leafy tropical plant, the first thing you're gonna grow it inside, generally it's water requirements, but some of these succulents that I'm seeing come on the market, I'm like, "Why is that outside? That's supposed to be inside." It's wintertime, or this so, but yeah, it is a business and that does make sense, and the nice thing is the Google ID phone app, for the most part, is pretty darn amazing. So you just need to take a picture, and the names, for the most part, come up.
Yes, technology is definitely helping, and then social media, makes
Mhm.
it so much easier too.
Yeah.
Uh, and if it's a Costa Farms plant, you can always email us a picture,
Okay.
and we have a full-time dedicated customer care team who will take a look at the picture. If they don't happen to know, they'll work with the growers and they'll get back to you with an answer.
Okay. I'm gonna ask you, and hopefully, um, I won't put you on the spot here, but do you guys have like a info on plants that you sell online, or is that just too difficult because the stock is rotating so much?
No, we have a relatively small percentage of the overall portfolio that we sell online at this
Okay.
point.
Okay. So you do have something.
Um, Yep,
Okay.
and
Okay.
all of the plant care information for the plants that you can buy, especially on our website,
Okay.
was written by me.
Okay.
And
There you
so
go.
if you if you don't like it, or if you have opportunities for improvement, just
Yeah,
let me know,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
readers of the world.
yeah. Hear that, everyone? Complain to him. No, just kidding. Yeah, well, that's good because I mean that there you go. If you buy a plant, and it's the information's there, and it can't be necessarily expected to be. But that you know what that is. I'm glad you brought that up because the names on tags. I've always wondered. I mean, I figured it was sort of mass, producing tags and just sticking them in there. And I knew different retailers needed their own barcodes and a lot of times added their own. So, but that does sort of clarify it a bit. This is fun getting
And
all like
then
the
and then
insights.
some retailers too, because we have to use their tags,
Mm-hmm.
it comes from their database. And like this is a personal point of whatever from me, but we have to use the name that's in their database, even if we don't agree with that name.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh, so it could just be
And
assorted house
yeah,
plant is the name.
or yeah, or
It would be like,
I don't want to call out a particular retailer, but there is a tag where the common name for Monstera deliciosa in
uh-huh.
their system
Yeah.
is split with philodendron.
Oh god.
And so many
Yeah.
people write in, and
Yeah.
they're absolutely correct that this is wrong,
Yeah.
but it's not our ability to change that. We can make
Yeah.
the recommendation to
Uh-huh.
the
Yeah.
database, but
Yeah.
ultimately they decide, yeah, we're going to change it, or no, we're not.
Yeah.
And
Okay. So if I
yeah,
see that, I won't be like, oh my God, they don't know what they're talking about. I'll keep that to myself then. Okay. That's good. That's good information. But yeah, sadly, you guys probably do get a lot of still, uh, grief for that one and others, I'm
and then
sure.
and then when we're shipping as many plants as we do,
Uh-huh.
unfortunately, there is human error, and it happens more often than we like. But to a degree, I think it's unavoidable, just because we're human beings. That sometimes the wrong tag will get put in a plant.
Oh yeah. I mean that yeah. I mean that happens everywhere. I mean, if anyone's ever grown vegetables, you're like, that's not the tomato that I planted, and you're waiting for it, or that's not the pepper. That's human error. That's just gonna happen. You print off, you don't even see it. I mean, it happens everywhere. So that's just gonna happen. But but it's still, it's still are growing plants and get to grow plants and all this stuff shouldn't bother people because, at the end of the day, it's about growing the plant.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um, well, this is fun. I'll probably have to have you back talking about other houseplant stuff. And then when you're up
I
and
would love to. I always love talking
I
plants.
know, me too, but this is sort of good. I got some what do the kids call it these days? The tea.
Yes,
Yes, the
yes.
tea on the my husband's looking at me weird. It's gossip, Joe. It's gossip. Only the cool people call it tea. I'm like, I think it's TEA, meaning tea like that. I don't know. But yeah, that's fun to hear the insights. And I think it's good for people to hear how production is, how these companies are, um, how it sort of works. We didn't get into all the nitty gritty because you guys have to have your trade secrets. But um, so any social media or any websites you want to promote?
We are on most of the socials,
Okay.
Facebook, Instagram, TikTok is a big one now.
Oh, yeah. Who's responsible for the
Um,
TikTok?
what's that?
Are you responsible for the TikTok? Or do you have
No,
social media?
happily.
Yeah,
I am too old to, to really understand TikTok, I think.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, I'm not venturing there. Yeah. Okay. So, and it's Costa Farms at all those pretty much?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Okay. And you guys have a
Um,
YouTube by chance?
yes,
Okay.
yep. YouTube was the one I forgot there,
Okay.
and Pinterest.
Oh, and Pinterest. Yeah. Good old Pinterest still there. So, okay. And
And
anything you want to promote on your end or you like to be behind the scenes?
yeah, I like to be behind the
Okay.
scenes. We do have a full website,
Okay.
and you can buy directly from us on the website. We ship to 48 of the 50 US states.
I did not know that. So
And
you can buy
so yeah,
directly from your
if you have
website.
trouble finding one of the plants that you really like, you may
Uh-huh.
be able to buy it online, have it shipped directly to your home from Costa Farms.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, that's good to know. Okay.
And that is super originally costafarms.com.
Okay. Hey, keeps it easy. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Um, great. Well, thanks for being on, and we'll definitely be in touch. And until next time, everyone, happy gardening.